Welcome to the Future of Canada Day, a virtual panel. My name is Thomas Peace. I'm a historian at Huron University and the co-director of the Huron Community History Centre, and I'll be your moderator for tonight's event. Through discussions this evening, this panel, featuring local community members who I'll introduce shortly, will tackle a complex question. What should be the future of Canada Day? This panel is brought to you by the London Heritage Council with the generous support of the City of London's Culture Office, and we thank them for both putting the panel together and the city for funding it. We want to start with an acknowledgement of the lands we call our home. The City of London is located on the lands of the Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, and Lenapehouk and Attawandaron peoples, on lands connected to the London Township and Sombra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. We'd like to recognize and honor the long-standing relationships with the three First Nations communities neighboring the City of London, the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, the Oneida Nation of the Thames, and the Munsee Delaware Nation. We're grateful for the opportunity to gather here, albeit virtually, and we thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Wherever you're joining us from this evening, we encourage you to take some time to learn about the First Peoples of your region, their past, treaty relationships, and of course, present relationships that we're in. Now, before we dive into our panel discussion, it's of course important for me to introduce our panel to you. So first up, I'd like to welcome Joette Lefebvre. Joette is Omushkego and is originally from the Omushkegowuk community of Peawanuck near Hudson's Bay. She's currently completing her Ph.D. in critical policy and educational leadership studies at Western University with a focus on Indigenous education. She's an intergenerational survivor of residential schools, Indian day schools, and Indian hospitals. Thank you for being with us today, Joette. Next, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Georgiana Stanciu. Romanian-born, Georgiana studied museums, art history, history of collecting, and cultural management. She worked for museums in Romania, France, and Canada, and throughout her career, Georgiana saw numerous projects completed in the area of exhibit development, collections management, education programs, and not-for-profit governance. Her expertise covers a wide range of topics, from fine arts history, mostly old masters in modern art, to military history in the 19th and 21st centuries. So welcome, Georgiana.
Thank you.
Now we turn to Dr. Imran Atta. Imran was born and raised in Pakistan and completed his medical degree and fellowship in general surgery and pediatric surgery in Pakistan before heading to the United Kingdom, where he obtained a fellowship in surgery from Royal College in Edinburgh. He served as a pediatric surgeon in Pakistan and later in Kuwait for 10 years before immigrating to Canada in 2009, when he enrolled at Western University and completed his residency in family medicine. He's worked since then as a family physician here in London and an emergency physician in a rural community hospital since 2012. He identifies as a Canadian of Pakistani origin, Indian by ethnicity, Punjabi by culture, and human by belief. It's good that you're here with us, Imran.
Thank you, Mercy.
And last but not least, introducing Dr. Michelle Hamilton, public historian at Western University. She's interested in historical and contemporary issues surrounding museums and heritage, repatriation, social memory and commemoration, cultural identity, and issues of representation, usually in regards to Indigenous peoples in Canada. She's also interested in the history of Indigenous communities in Ontario and is currently researching the relationship between Southwestern Ontario reserves and cities in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. So thank you for being here, Michelle, and welcome to all of our panelists, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much.
So we have some great questions generated from the public tonight, and I think we're going to have a wonderful discussion. And so the way we're going to format this discussion is that I'm going to ask a common question, and then we'll work through each of the panelists in different orders each time, and we'll kind of see where we end up at the end of our hour. So kicking it off, we're going to start with a really general question, but a personal one that hopefully will help our audience understand a little bit more about who you are and where you're coming from. And that question is, what does Canada Day mean to you? And I thought we'd start with you, Imran.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so I being a quite recent and new immigrant, and of course, very happy. So I had celebrated Canada Day each year after arriving, even before my citizenship was completed. It's just a way for me to thank my country where I am, just to appreciate what I have, the freedom, the security, everything. Because I've lived in different countries, born in Pakistan and worked in Middle East. And I always thought that being an immigrant, I appreciate what Canada is way too more than people who were born over here. And so I could see the difference. And it's just like a Mother Day. You love your mother every day, but one day you specifically set aside to acknowledge and thank and honor. And so our motherland, I mean, Canada adopted me. Canada is mine, and I'm Canadian. So my way is to go out and actually just celebrate it, not only celebrate. It's a way of thanking what I really have, finding the difference. And I find it very important. I mean, coming to Canada, I saw people from everywhere, different languages, different cultures, different belief systems. So one day we go to the downtown or Harris Park or wherever. We have some Canadian symbols. Everyone is really in a mood where we bond together, strengthen our bond as a nation, leaving aside what separates us. So we just, that day we are just Canadian. And I thought it's very important. And I've always done that. So that's personally mean to me. I mean, so much Canada has to offer, and I have so much appreciation. I'm not saying people who born over here or always lived don't have, but I feel I have more to acknowledge and thank for. So that's what it means to me briefly.
Well, thank you very much, Iran. Joette, do you want to take a stab at that question? What does Canada Day mean to you?
Sure. I'm going to answer this question with a little story. As a child, I would read the words Canada's Day written on a calendar, but it didn't have any meaning for me at the time. I grew up in a fly-in community that has no high school. So when it was time to start high school, I left home and my family to attend high school in Southern Ontario. And I knew I carried something with me that made me strong, who I was, and connected me with my grandparents and parents. And that was our language, our relationships, and our stories. At that time, in my experience, the prescribed education left those parts out. In high school, I felt that in a profound way. I would call my dad on the telephone and ask, why does it feel like this to be here? What did you have to do for school? Did you have to leave home? And it was through these conversations with family and my experiences that I began to learn about the painful histories of genocide and the horrendous harm, and how close that was in my family. It was hurtful and it was painful to learn that my loved ones as children were separated from family and put through these so-called schools and a so-called healthcare system. And it was also hurtful and painful to know this as a young student, and then to experience not having these conversations in prescribed education in a caring and respectful way. It made me feel silenced. In my family, I consider myself the prescribed educated generation. After residential school, Indian day school, and Indian hospitals in my family, in my experience, the prescribed education subtly carries the same values. And I felt this when the truth is not taught in a caring or respectful way, and when the strengths that make you who you are as an Omushkego Innu are excluded and silenced within this education that you are in, that I was in as a young student. So I think that this journey, when I think of when I think of Canada Day, it's these sorts of, I guess, conflicts and experiences that come to mind. I've always celebrated Canada's Day, and my community will have a community gathering, a cookout, and with games and traditional food. So it is Canada Day is something that we all have a vision for, but I don't think that we're not yet where we need to be yet.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I mean, it's really important that we hear about the stories that have been silenced and have not been heard and are not often shared in institutions like our schools that are responsible for conveying the history of this place we call Canada. Georgiana, I'm going to turn it over to you. And I should mention your background. You're the executive director at the Royal Canadian Regiment Museum, which I neglected to mention in your introduction, but want to fit in there now. What does Canada Day mean to you?
Well, I have a very pragmatic approach, and I will start by saying that Canada Day is a different thing for me before this panel. After this panel, I am sure it will be something else. So my answer is what Canada Day is for me before the panel, and it's a very pragmatic approach. There is a double perspective, the professional perspective and the personal perspective. So on a personal level, to be honest with you, it is many times a well-deserved day off, at the end of which I would like to watch the fireworks on a boat on one of the 3 Great Lakes. That is something very relaxing, and in my mind, it associates with Canada Day. But that's the very personal level. On a professional level, things get a little more complicated because it may be a logistic nightmare, or it may be an excellent outreach opportunity in the community for the museum. And that is if there is a gathering in the city where we can have some representation. So it's a logistic nightmare because we try to find the best solutions, the best programming, adopt the cost-effective options, but the efforts pay off because we eventually come back with very nice metrics at the end of the day, and we are happy we caught a large audience. So yes, I acknowledge it is a very pragmatic approach, and it is the approach that I had before this panel. Maybe at the end, I will find out myself, I'm still processing, what Canada Day will be after this panel.
Thanks, Georgiana. I'm on a museum board. It's funny that you used to say those metrics, right? Canada Day is one of those high metric days for museums.
Yeah, so for some of us, it just revolves around this type of aspects.
All right, we'll turn it over now to Michelle Hamilton. What does this day mean for you, Michelle?
Well, like Joette, when I started thinking about this question, it reminded me of my parents' history and what my mother always used to tell me about what Canada meant to her. Both my parents came to Canada as children from England after the Second World War. They were both from working class families. And so my mother always used to say to me that the opportunities in Canada for her and then her children were much greater than those that would have been available in post-war England. And so I was told all the time that, you know, my ability to go to university to get an education and then use that education to get a good job is something that I never would have been able to do in England if I had been born there. And so I sort of accepted that for a long time. And then I went to university as an 18-year-old. And in my first semester, I took a course in anthropology because I had sort of a vague interest in Indigenous peoples and history. And the instructor sort of changed how I looked at history. And that's where my interest began in Indigenous history and Canadian history. And I started to realize that you know, for people like my mother, post-war immigrants, that, you know, that meaning was correct, but the other side of the narrative was not there, which is, you know, who had to lose things like land and treaty status and political status in order to make room for immigrants. And so it kind of has a double meaning for me.
Thanks, Michelle. That history, both told and untold, is something that kind of hearing from all four of you. And it's one of the reasons that we're having this discussion today, I think, because in the past decade and a half, Canadians' understanding of our heritage is much more complex than it once was, something that I think both you, Michelle, and Joette have really pointed our attention towards in your comments. And as a country, I mean, we've had to grapple with the ways in which our country's leaders have upheld ongoing legacies of residential schools, anti-Black racism, Islamophobia, and other forms of hatred and discrimination. And so my next question for you is it possible to observe Canada Day and still acknowledge the country's difficult history and its complicated presence? Maybe we'll turn it back over to you, Michelle, to start us off on that question.
Sure. So I think it is possible to do both. I'll note here that the word observe is different than celebrate or commemorating history. To me, commemorating or celebrating history sometimes means overlooking the negative. But if you allow me just to diverge into a little bit of the history of Canada Day for a second, the meaning and interpretation has already changed since the beginning. So it was established as an official holiday in 1879. It was called Dominion Day then, and then it became nationally supported in 1958 and it became Canada Day. But if you look at how Canada Day has changed over the past 50 years, the meaning of it has gone from only looking at the English and French contributions to now really emphasizing ethnic diversity and tolerance of Canadians and the Canadian government. So I kind of look at that as the potential that we could change the meaning of Canada Day as we go on, so that we can make it more complex, I guess, and recognize more than just the English and the French nations as was what was considered to be founding nations in the 1950s. And I think we need to be critical too. So a lot of times when historians look at Canada Day, we look at the fact that they're meant to promote unity and kind of a feel-good nationalism. But I think we can be somewhat critical and educate ourselves on what's missing. And the other thing I think that is important is that in some ways it's important what we do after Canada Day. So I think one of the criticisms of Canada Day from some people is that it can be just a token recognition of diversity and tolerance, and that one day is not enough. It's important that not only do we recognize diversity, but that we actually follow up during the rest of the year to make changes that address the inequalities and systemic racism.
I sense the broader context is really a key piece here to what you're bringing to the table. Let's turn it over to you, Iram.
Me? Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, we are not using the word celebration. We are using the word observation and that's what we are doing sitting today. We are talking, pondering, contemplating what we are, what was our past, what we are going to do in future. Yes, history is painful. There are good things and bad things. It's not all good. It's not all bad, but that's our history. That's my heritage. That's how I personally see it. I mean, when I say Canada is mine, and again think, I am Canadian. All what happened over here is mine. All people over here are mine. They're my extended family. I left my family. This is my family. This is my place. And my history starts thousands of years ago with Aboriginal history. They are our ancestors. Like I'm of Indian ethnicity from subcontinent. When we talk about, and everyone does, we talk about our history, which is thousands of years old and traditions and history. I was not there 5,000 years ago. I was not there even 100 years ago. But when I say my history, so I own it. Coming to Canada, I own everything Canada is, starting from the Aboriginal history. I mean, they are now our family. It's my extended family. I had always seen that. On a Canada Day, the sunrise ceremony, I made a point 2-3 years ago when it was to go to the fire, lighting the sacred fire. There was a custodian of the fire to understand that. Because I always feel it's all I own that. All the mistakes made, there's no one to blame. Those people and generation are gone. We are the current generation. I own it, my history, the mistakes made. I'm here to not only apologize personally, it starts at a personal level. Politicians and leaders will do what we want them to do. We are the force of the change over here. I own it. I start at my level. I own that history. It's my history being a Canadian. Goods and bads were done. Of course, it was painful, but we can't change the past, but we can change the future. What happens today from this hour next is what we can change. So yes, it's a painful past. We can heal. We can start the process of healing together. We can join hand as a nation. We should observe. We can observe. That's the purpose of marking a day. Of course, it needs everyday effort, but one day we sit and see what we have done in the last year, what we promised to do, where we have gone, where we are, what needs to be done. So yes, observing a day, any day is important that way. We cannot say we love our mothers, we don't need to celebrate a particular day. No, we do. That they particularly sit down for one specific reason. That is my past. That's my inheritance. I own all the mistakes. I own all the good things. And I'm between two. I'm thankful to my Aboriginal ancestors, the rich history, the culture, and the Aboriginal elders. I need to ask for forgiveness on my part and ask them to take me in. I'm here. I'm also a child of this land. Now, this is my land. That history is mine. Let's see how we can heal the wounds and move forward. Yes, we can ignore the history, but marking a day to go over that history, make sure that injustice or whatever wrongs were done, they are not done. The good things, carry them forward. That everyone has made sacrifices. In my entrance, if people there knows, for example, there's an Omushkegowuk on one side, Canadian flag on the other. On my terrace, I have a totem pole kind of thing and Canadian. I am thankful to both. The people who had the land, the people who came later on and sowed the seed, the fruit I am taking. So I'm thankful to both. But of course, I feel for everyone, everyone is my extended family over here. So that's our history, and we, each one of us, own that history, we inherit that. So it's not anyone's else, I was not there, I'm not responsible. I don't think so. That's how I see the painful history. Yes, if history was painful in the past, the future doesn't have to be painful. Let's start it today to make it bright and beautiful for everyone.
It's interesting. I mean, your comments really build well off of what Michelle was saying. Michelle was talking about the past, and you're kind of building off of that and talking about the present and the future. But let's turn now to Joette. Joette, your comments earlier spoke to real silences about the past in the school system. And so I'm wondering about your take on this question.
Yeah, similar to my high school experience, where it was painful to learn about residential school, Indian day school, Indian hospital, and sterilization, and to know these histories and stories that Canada let a role in, and to know this and know how absent that truth was for my education journey. It was hurtful and painful to experience that. I think this question that you asked speaks to that experience. I don't have a direct answer, except that the question speaks to a necessary process that opens conversation, difficult conversation to navigate through. I believe it's a process that we as Indigenous people have always felt and are very well familiar with. I want to remember the 215 children's bodies found in Kamloops Indian Residential School. And we know that this number is higher across Canada's former residential school sites. In light of this, has brought this question, this process to a national conversation.
Thanks, Joette. And we're going to come back to that in a few moments, because I think this is really a critical moment in Canada's history as we reflect on what we're learning about this past that some people knew, and for other peoples, it's just beginning to be laid out. Georgiana, let's turn to you for the last word on this question about acknowledging the country's difficult history and its complicated present.
Well, it is a very important moment indeed. And here what I have to say is we definitely have to observe a national holiday as a country. How and when we do that, it's different discussion. And as I was saying earlier, for me, this aspect is before this panel, after this panel. And obviously it coincides with the latest findings in British Columbia. And what I have to say is that the country's history is difficult. There are countries with more difficult history and they are still overcoming it. The conversation has to take place, and people have to feel comfortable about recognizing the truth, finding out the truth. And I think that's the key point here. The truth needs to be told as it was, with scholarly research, proper research, exactly what happened, and whether it's called whatever terminology we decide to use. In the end, at the end of the tunnel, this will make all of us stronger. The fact that we have acknowledged the truth.
Thanks, Georgiana. I'm going to do something. I always worry about doing this, but Joette, your comments really call attention to a question I was going to ask in a few moments, but not next. But I'm going to jump to it now because many places, including Victoria, British Columbia, and several other cities across the country, have canceled their Canada Day celebrations in response to the discovery of the unmarked graves of children who attended the residential schools in Kamloops, Brandon, and elsewhere. And yet other Canadians have responded to this and suggested that such an action is unpatriotic. And so one of the things that Londoners asked is, are they right? Is it unpatriotic not to celebrate Canada Day? And I thought we might go to you first, Joette, to respond to that question.
I think I'm not sure about the word, if the word unpatriotic or patriotic is the right word to use here. But to answer that question, I'm going to say, no, I don't believe that. I think that it'll take some time, maybe some years, maybe generations before Canada Day becomes the Canada Day that is reflective of its true histories and that is envisioned by all of us, including myself. And until we get to that point, it is necessary to keep having these conversations, keep asking those questions as we navigate through the coming times. I mentioned in my previous answer to the question earlier that this is a process. We cannot ignore this conversation. We can't forget about it next year, and we can't downwash it as, a conversation or an event separate from Canada.
Conversation is central to it. Thank you very much, Joette. Georgiana, let's turn it back over to you.
Well, again, I'm fully on the same tune here with my predecessor. I don't think patriotic, unpatriotic is the right way to look upon the situation. I think it's a matter of navigating a difficult moment and knowing how to do it without injuring ourselves or our partners in the discussion. So the most important and the key aspect, again, I think it's the truth and the fact that the truth can come to light. And I think that plays in everyone's favor and to the positive, stronger Canadians at the end of the tunnel. It may be a very long time. And I agree that this is a process that will last several years, probably generations.
Thanks, Georgiana. Michelle, what do you think about this question?
I agree. I don't think it's unpatriotic not to celebrate Canada Day. I was just thinking about it as the other people were speaking, that really the decision to not celebrate it out in BC, there are several communities that have decided not to, Victoria, I think, being the first one perhaps, is more about an attitude of respect, I think, for the children who have been found, as well as their families, and more broadly, any family who has experienced this kind of trauma, even though perhaps, as I'm sure we know, that not all of the graves have been found at all residential schools. So there's many more people affected. So I think it's a matter of respect. Yeah, so I think unpatriotic is perhaps the wrong term. I'll agree with the others there. Some things take priority, I think, over a national holiday, and I think certainly death and trauma is probably one of those.
Thanks, Michelle. And Imran, we'll give you the last word on this question.
Yeah, I agree with everyone. I mean, this is a quite a loaded word, patriotic. For example, this year we are not celebrating. I'm not celebrating. I had done it ever. And no one needs to tell me I'm unpatriotic. I'm a very proud Canadian national. I know what I am. How can you celebrate when we are realizing we are just starting to know what we don't know, what we need to know. When a huge and a very significant part of our nation, our population, a part of our body lost everything and others gained. And so it's a perspective. People who lost, how do you expect them to celebrate? But they are not unpatriotic, they are not bad, they are not unthankful. Celebration comes in certain contexts when there are thousands of missing children and women unaccounted for, their communities here with all the prosperity and all the luxury I have, who don't have drinking water or safe housing or medical facilities, who don't have any rights, who don't have the equal opportunity, starting from Aboriginal to other. I mean, when people are excluded due to any reason, the gender or race or orientation or color or language, they can't celebrate. We have to first bring that healing, justice, equality, everything, and then we expect those kind of questions. We have to give people the reason to celebrate. We don't have to criticize, give them the reason to celebrate. People will celebrate. When you feel happy, you are happy, it shows. When people are deprived and left behind, when there's so many things, let's say I focus on Aboriginal things, and our heart goes there. I mean, when there are people, when the children who are unaccounted for and women unaccounted for, how can people just suddenly get up and start celebrating? Yes, Canada Day is important. This land is important. This country is important. There's nothing. It's just the context. It's the wrong thing to label other people. I can do whatever, talk about myself, but everyone is as good as I am over here. I may be a little different thinking or talking, but that doesn't make anyone inferior or different or anything unpatriotic. I don't think so. I wouldn't never say that.
Thanks, Imran. One of the things I'm hearing over the course of our conversation is really this importance of reflection and this grappling with our present moment and what this day, which many people associate with celebration, means in a context where we have learned about horrific tragedies in our country's past, and we're beginning to grapple and process them. And so, given your responses, I'm wondering what you would encourage the people viewing our panel to do on Canada Day this year. Why don't we start with you, Georgiana?
With me? Okay. Well, you know, I was just thinking of the question now, and I think, in particular this year, when the entire nation is basically in mourning, Canadians should take the time to pause and reflect to determine what is it that makes this country great. Is it because it is the second largest country in the world, covering 2 oceans to the North Pole? It has the Great Lakes, it has the stunning Rocky Mountains, or absolutely magnificent Algonquin Park, or the picturesque Fundy Bay? Is it because Canada is the country of Glenn Gould, Sir Frederick Banting, Tom Thomson, Emily Carr, and so on, not to prolong too much? Or is it because the country acknowledges diversity, multiculturalism, inclusion, and welcomes everyone? So it's a country that offers everyone hope, perhaps for a better life. And so what makes Canada great for each and every one of us? I think that's the main question. And this is what I will do myself. It's my next step in the process.
A moment of reflection. Thanks, Georgiana.
Yes.
Let's turn it over to you, Imran.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what I would say, on my level, I think, I mean, let's start to educate and learn. We have just started to know things. Let's get guidance from our Aboriginal elders, their wisdom, their blessings, and form a nation really, because this is our home. There's no back home. I never use the term. I somehow despise the term back home. There's no back home. I left that home, made Canada my home. Canada adopted me. This is my home. Even my relatives sometimes feel that a sense of loss. Oh, you have roots over there. And I tell them with very respect, I was born over there. I don't have a root. I can't survive and prosper if my roots are there, I'm here. I like a small plant coming from nursery, planted over here. I'm getting roots over here. I'm using this land, this energy, breathing in this air, having over here the land, the Aboriginal land, and my roots are over here, for example, with all this, whatever development is done. And that I give back to my local land. So let's come together as a nation. Of course, we are a very versatile nation, very unique place where people are from everywhere. We have to all get together, join hands. We cannot live in isolation. If it's a home, we have people around, we are home. We need to share. We need to share this blessing, this home, find the ways to heal, be together, become a nation in that way, because there is something common we can always find, even with the Aboriginal, let's say the question. In Indian, for example, in our tradition, we used to think there is a spirit and we pray to sun, moon, trees and rivers and stones. And same I've come to know about the Aboriginal kind of belief, there's a spirit everywhere. So we have in common, even otherwise, we have always between different cultures and faiths something in common, and we can come together as a Canada, though we look different. And even if we look different on a human level, we are same, the same number of fingers, toes, same blood group. So we have so much in common. If there are things different, there are things to celebrate, to enjoy. It's like a one-dish party. Everyone brings a dish. It becomes a buffet. You have a variety. Just thank, enjoy, party, and make Canada great. We have to start with people who are deprived, who are in pain, who are suffering. Unless everyone is happy, no one can be happy. We have to share and make sure everyone is involved. Everyone gets a share, rights and equal opportunities, acknowledgement of their losses, and try to make at our individual level it starts. It doesn't start with the leaders. I don't believe so. It will start with us. Going to our Aboriginal relatives and asking them, what can I do? What do you expect me? Educate me. I need to learn. I need to know what is appropriate. What can I do at my level? If we all do a little thing, I think we can make a great change. We can make leaders and people in power to change and acknowledge it is late. It's too late. It's urgent, and this needs to be done urgently. And the recent events have created actually a sense of urgency. We need to do that. On this Canada Day, we have to sit and see. We don't want another Canada Day the same way. No, not at all. We have to start this hour and today. Let's make it a great nation. Let's make it's a beautiful place. Let's make it a leader of the world. And as I said, we cannot leave behind a very significant and important people behind, and we can all enjoy the luxury given to us. No, we should be ready to do that on our level.
One of the things I hear you saying, Imran, is making this place a home for all, which I think is
yes,
a really important concept. Joette, what would you encourage Canadians to do on this Canada Day?
I guess before I answer this question, I just want to highlight mourning. I know in my practice in my a value in my home community is when we are in mourning is that everything stops up for respect for that family and to mourn with that family. And just thinking about the time that we are in, I'm thinking about our brothers and sisters all across this country. And going on to answer this question, my encouragement would be to continue to have these conversations. They're not easy conversations. Having these conversations in the multiple spaces we hold is a beginning to justice and healing for voices and a history that were and are silenced. That's my answer.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. And that mourning and that kind of collective action and grief, I think, is something that again it speaks to the sense of community and is really important to call our attention to. Michelle, how about you?
I like something that Imran said, which was to start with the personal. And to that, I think I might add to start with the local as well and learn about the City of London and the people who live here, as well as the people who live around London. Most of what we've heard about residential schools has been about Western Canada. And I wonder how many Londoners know that there was a residential school about half an hour away from where we live today, the Mount Elgin Industrial Institute. And it only closed in 1949, which is really not that long ago in the scheme of things. So I really liked Imran's suggestion about going to the sunrise ceremony and start with the personal. And then we've got other places in London. Unfortunately, with COVID, some of them are not open. The Museum of Ontario Archaeology is a good place to go to learn about the long-term presence of Indigenous peoples in our area. I don't think it's open for a couple of weeks, though, unfortunately. But we could also do things like learn about, one of the things that came to mind was learning about the history of street names. There's been a petition, I think it was coming out of Toronto, but it certainly applies to London, about the naming of Dundas Street. And for those who haven't heard about the petition, Henry Dundas was a British politician who delayed the abolition of slavery for about 15 years. And so people have been questioning why we should name anything after him. And so if we think about all the names of our streets, for instance, in the city, you'll start to realize that many of them are named after British politicians or military figures, and start thinking about London's relationship to England and English colonial policies that got enacted within Canada. There are some things to do. I was thinking about what actual physical things people could do on Canada Day in London, and there are some things that one can do even in COVID times. So there are some good walking tours that you can do either on your smartphone or if you have data on your cell phone that you can download, and you can do those, in socially distanced terms. And some of those are available for free. And so that might be a good activity to get the family out.
Well, for that, I mean, it's a really great practical list that you've given people, and also for calling our attention to the Mount Elgin Institute and the reality that the city is deeply implicated in the history of residential schools in ways that are sometimes obscured or forgotten, a theme that's come up earlier tonight. So for our last question, we want to turn now. We've spent a lot of time talking about the past. We've done a little bit of talking about the present, but now we want to move into the future and what the future of Canada Day looks like to you. And I want to refine it a bit. You don't need to kind of take me up on this, but I was also thinking that it might be helpful if you could to frame it in this way and to ask you, if you could shape how our city marks this day, what would you do? And I'm going to turn it over to Imran first, and call attention. Maybe you have some fashion advice for Londoners, but I just wanted to sneak that in there. But in all seriousness, what do you think about the future of Canada Day? What does it look like to you?
Yeah, it's hope. It looks good because the things which happened in the recent past gives a lot of hope. We are not the same people a year ago. We are different. We have evolved. We have learned. We're ready to learn. We're ready to acknowledge. We're ready to heal. We're ready to come together. But we have just started taking steps in the right direction. If we continue on the path, there's a lot of hope. The future is good, not only for Canada Day. It's good for Canada. It's good for me. It's good for all of us. It's good for our generations to come. But we have to continue what we have started to do. The future of Canada and Canada Day is good if we can heal that all, relieve the pain, make equal everyone, give everyone a reason to celebrate. We won't, as I said, unless people have a reason to celebrate, how do you expect them to do that? We can ask our Aboriginal family, what do you want us to do? We don't have, it's not only fireworks and music and dance. What do you want us to do on a Canada Day? As I said, the sunrise, the sacred fire lighting ceremony, we go and share, then we understand. Sometimes it's difficult to understand other people's perspective, but the only way to learn is keen to be learning. And I think it's good if we continue to do right things. A time will come, though it's a difficult journey. We don't have to lose hope. Again, basic is that we have to ask our Aboriginal family, our elders, share with them, get their blessings, get their wisdom, what way you want us to celebrate so we are all happy. So that's the future of Canada Day. There used to be in Harris Park, a ceremony used to start with Aboriginal people bringing their flag and with their dance, then everyone joins hand, goes in a circle. It was beautiful. It didn't happen 2 years ago. I don't know if they're still having their sunrise ceremony. It used to be in Wortley Village at the church. Let's do that. Let's join hand. Let's ask. There's no one way to celebrate Canada Day. We can by asking and sharing and being sensitive to each other, loving each other. Actually, when I'm Canadian, everyone in Canada has different culture, language, all is mine. I can share, that makes me more rich culturally and belief-wise and tradition-wise. And I think that's what I see the future of Canada Day. The Aboriginal people have to lead us. It's their land. We came over here. We are also over here. Please take us in and take us as one of your own. Of course, I'm ready to share. I'm ready to have less. If sometimes it's contrary to what modern world and development means, it's more material, seeing everything, resources as a way to make money and progress and wealth is not always the right way. We may not be able to do that. We become more, not wealthy, but rich. We become rich otherwise, spiritually. So that also is important for a nation to develop. I think that's the way Canada Day should be in the future. I have a lot of hope with the things that are taking shape. Of course, it's difficult, it's a long journey. We will continue our effort at all levels. We'll force our leaders, our governments to also consider that so that Canada Day truly becomes a Canada Day. That's what I see for the future and hope for the future.
Thank you, Ron. And the centrality of relationships really comes clear in what you've shared with us tonight. Michelle, you've given us a list of things that we can do in a couple of days, but what about the future? What does the future hold for Canada?
Well, I was just thinking about it as Imran was speaking. I guess first I'll go back to the idea that Canada Day's meaning has changed over the last 100 years. So for those who are stuck in but this is the way it's always been way of thinking, that's not actually the case. And so we can use that to learn that it can evolve as we go forward. I'm encouraged by the City of London's recent steps to be more inclusive in the hiring of people who will help them achieve that mandate. And that's supposed to cover all sort of city actions. So that may affect Canada Day here in the city in the future. I really like Imran's idea of asking the Indigenous peoples for their input rather than trying to impose some sort of action without their input. So I think that's really important. And then I guess I'll end with the idea of citizenship. I think Canada Day is partly about citizenship, recognizing citizenship, being a good citizen. And I think everybody has to ask themselves, what does it mean to be a good citizen? And take that to Canada Day as well as all the other days of the year.
Thanks for those comments, Michelle. One of the things that in preparation for this panel, I was talking with a colleague about this question. And one of the things she reminded me of course, is the importance of citizenship ceremonies on this day. And for many people, of course, this is a day that they became Canadian citizens, which was something I hadn't been totally thinking about at that time. Georgiana, how do you approach this question about the future of Canada?
I would say that this was the most difficult question for me because I'm not sure yet. Circling back to my idea of before the panel, after the panel, first of all, that coincides, of course, with the discovery of the difficult history that was mentioned here. So there are many variables for the future, right? And I have to take into the account the stretch of the pandemic. I hope next year there will be no restriction, but that is just a hope. But also I am keen on finding out more and knowing the facts, the truth about the unsettling discoveries and what are the circumstances of this state policies that carried on for so long. I mean, I'm not a scholar of this topic, and I am just waiting to dive into scholarly papers from people like yourself or Michelle, who have studied the topic and see exactly what happened. I mean, it is really unsettling to discover this happening 100 years before the Second World War. And it carries on until a little bit after the Second World War. So how are we mitigating this? It's really very difficult to see how Canada Day will shape in the future. The reflection is very important, and I think that will determine the shape and form of future Canada Days.
Thank you. That grappling with this history of genocide and the silencing of it, I mean,
yeah,
is really the subtext that we're addressing tonight.
Exactly.
We'll give you the last word on this question about the future of Canada Day. What do you think the future holds?
Throughout this discussion, I've been highlighting conversations. I think these conversations are describing a relationship building, hopefully. You know, that's the vision, that's the hope being described in these conversations. There's a lot of work to be done. And the future of Canada's Day, for me, it is continuing to have these conversations of what Canada Day signifies as a country until what is done wrong is done right. That's my answer.
Thanks, Joette. Well, Joette Lefebvre, Michelle Hamilton, Imran Mata, and Georgiana Stanciu, thank you very much for being with us this evening and joining us on this panel. I'd be remiss, of course, if I didn't also thank Deirdre Ghosh from the London Heritage Council, who did the lion's share of the work organizing the panel, and of course is sitting off camera slightly, but thank you very much, Deirdre, for putting this together. And for a conversation that has been very rich as we kind of explore this history of this day, what this country means, and where we're going as a national community. Thank you to you as well for tuning in to this panel. And the London Heritage Council would like to thank the City of London's Culture Office for their support as well. This couldn't have happened without the city's support, and of course without the hard work of the Heritage Council as well. And on that note, wherever you side in this discussion, whatever you think about Canada Day, we're heading into a long weekend. So on behalf of the panelists and the London Heritage Council, we wish you all an enjoyable holiday weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.